Let us pray. As Canadians and as Albertans, we give thanks for the precious gifts of freedom and peace which we enjoy. As members of this Legislative Assembly, we rededicate ourselves to the valued traditions of parliamentary democracy as a means of serving our province and our country. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Mr. Speaker, a few short weeks ago we had a significant political event in Alberta. There was a by-election, as all members know, in the Chinook constituency, contested by 5 good candidates in a very good campaign. Because it was a by-election, Mr. Speaker, there were all kinds of dire predictions for the government candidate. And then on November the 23rd, 1987, the election was held. Every other candidate lost their deposit. Mr. Speaker, we had a superb candidate in that by-election who waged a great campaign, and the people of her constituency gave her overwhelming support. She is with us today in your gallery, and I'm sure all members will want to welcome her. Mrs. Shirley McClellan, MLA-elect for the Chinook constituency, accompanied today by her husband, Lloyd. I'd ask them to rise and be recognized by this assembly. Presenting petitions.
Member for Edmonton Meadowlark, followed by Edmonton Avonmore.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to present a petition signed by over 600 residents of Alberta. These citizens request that the Assembly urge the government to reconsider its disastrous health care policies. I have a second petition as well.
Recognition in a moment. Edmonton Avonmore.
Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago I tabled a petition with 8,400 names signed by Albertans calling for, among other things, that Alberta be declared a nuclear weapons-free zone. I would again today table a further petition signed by 68 Albertans.
Here, Edmonton Meadowlark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to present a second petition signed by over 100 residents of Alberta. These citizens request that the Assembly urge the government to reconsider its decision to de-insure Alberta health care coverage of optometric services.
Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees.
Member for Drumheller.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Private Bills has had the following bills under consideration and recommends that they be proceeded with. Bill PR 25, Security Home Trust Company Act. Bill PR 26, Fair and Milliken Insurance Company Act. Bill PR 27, Hermo T. Patagon Bar Admission Act. I request the concurrence of the Assembly in this recommendation.
Having heard the request from the honourable member from Drumheller for concurrence in the recommendations of the Standing Committee on Private Bills, does the Assembly agree with the request? Opposed? Carried.
Notices of motions.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to give oral notice that I will rise under Standing Order 40 at the end of oral question period and seek the unanimous consent of the Assembly to waive the normal notice requirements, so I may then put on a motion congratulating and thanking Messrs. Reagan and Gorbachev on the event of their signing the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty yesterday. I have copies of the notice for all members.
Introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill 234, an act to amend the Pharmaceutical Association Act. Mr. Speaker, Albertans cherish very highly the value of their healthcare system, and the principle of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that when a pharmacist is filling a prescription, he will use a drug or drug combination that is the generic or brand name equivalent of that named in the prescription at the lowest possible cost.
Honourable Member for Lethbridge West, as the Chair was engaged in a few other things, it was indeed Bill 234. Is that correct? The Honourable Member for Lethbridge West has moved for first reading Bill number 234, an act to amend the Pharmaceutical Association Act. Those members willing to give consent to first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion carries.
Bill number 234, an act to amend the Pharmaceutical Association Act, introduced by the Honourable Mr. Gogo, is now read a first time.
Member for Lethbridge West.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill 249. It's an act to amend the School Act in Alberta. Mr. Speaker, the bill provides that in each and every school in Alberta, at the commencement of each day, each school will hold an assembly attended by all teachers and students, at which the national anthem will be sung.
The Honourable Member for Lethbridge West has further moved Bill 249, an act to amend the School Act. Those members wishing to give consent to first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. So ordered.
Bill number 249, an act to amend the School Act, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Gogo, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports.
Speaker, I would like to table copies of the audited financial statements for the year ended March 31st, 1987 for 7 Crown hospitals. They are the Alberta Cancer Board, the Alberta Children's Provincial General Hospital, the Foothills Provincial General Hospital, the Glenrose Rehabilitation Hospital, the University Hospital Board, Alberta Hospital Ponoka, and Alberta Hospital Edmonton. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I would like to table the annual report for the year 1986 for the Alberta Association of Optometrists.
Minister of Technology, Research and Telecommunications.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table a motion for return number 192 accepted on April 14th by my colleague, Honourable Neil Crawford.
Associate Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table the Farm Safety Rural School Program Review Report. It highlights the recognition of the importance of farm safety in agriculture.
Minister of Recreation and Parks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure, Mr. Speaker, to table the 10th annual report of the Recreation Parks and Wildlife Foundation. While I'm on my feet, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to extend thank you to the many hundreds of volunteers who work so hard to make the Foundation's program so successful.
Solicitor General.
I'd like to table, Mr. Speaker, the annual report for Mortgage and Housing Corporation.
Introduction of special guests.
Member for Highwood.
Mr. Speaker, within the confines of the public gallery today are 3 Highwood constituents who all hail from the home of the Nanton Lancaster bomber. They are members of the Society for the Preservation of the said aircraft, and I present to you the President of the Society, George White, and 2 very significant members of the board, David Burrell and Danny Fox. May I ask them to rise in their places to accept not only the warm greetings of the House, but the best wishes of all of us for a successful conclusion to their very sincere and beneficial endeavor.
Edmonton Belmont, followed by the Associate Minister of Agriculture, followed by Red Deer North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure today to introduce to you and to all members of the Assembly 14 grades 2 to grade 5 students from the Kildare Elementary School in my constituency. Mr. Speaker, these 14 students are members of the Academic Challenge class. They're accompanied today by their teacher, Nancy Hillerud, and a junior high school helper, Jody Bell. I would ask that they rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Associate Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure today to introduce Costas I had this all worked out before I stood up. Papagorgias, who is the director of the National Hail Suppression Program in Greece. And with him today is Douglas Davidson from Intera. Costas is here to review our experience in hail suppression. If they're in the Speaker's Gallery, would they stand and receive the warm welcome of our
Red Deer North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Also in your gallery today, it's of significance that as we've introduced a new member to the Assembly, we have the honor of welcoming a former member, Mr. Jim McPherson of Red Deer. Mr. Speaker, I believe it's a fitting testimonial of the tremendous job he did in serving his constituents and indeed all of the province that the government in its wisdom deemed it necessary to have 2 MLAs follow him. And it is an honor for us to follow in his large footsteps. I'd ask every member of the Assembly to give him a warm welcome today.
Edmonton Gold Bar, and then we're going to come to Redwater Andrew.
Thank you.
This is almost as exciting as question period.
Not quite. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce to you and through you to the members of this Assembly a group of grade 6 students from Holyrood School in Edmonton Gold Bar. Students are accompanied by their teacher, Gracia Brinkman. They're seated in the public gallery. May I ask that they rise and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Redwater Andrew, followed by Calgary Glenmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure this is more exciting question period. Today, Mr. Speaker, I have the honor of introducing 2 people to you and through you to the Assembly. One is a very important person to the Redwater Andrew constituency. She's Audrey Loschuk, and she is my constituency secretary for the Smoky Lake and Lamont office. And the other is Father Roman from St. Basil's Cathedral, and he's visiting the legislature and hopefully putting the blessing of the free trade agreement here. One is they're in the public and members gallery. I ask they rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Calgary Glenmore, Edmonton Calder, Solicitor General.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce to you and through you to members of this Assembly a member of my constituency from Calgary Glenmore, Mr. Harley Stump, who is sitting in the members gallery. Mr. Stump, if you'd please rise. Mr. Stump is from the 285 Legion and has fought in World War II. And I would like this Assembly to know that he has perfect attendance at all my town hall meetings and is the only one that does. And I'd like you to join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Stump.
Edmonton Calder.
Mr. Speaker, it is my pleasure today to introduce to you and to members of the Assembly 2 groups of students on behalf of the member from Edmonton Glengarry. The first group is 23 grade 10 students from Archbishop O'Leary School. They're accompanied by their teachers, Mr. Michael Carby and Mr. Roger LeCurry. They're seated in the public gallery, I think. And I would ask them to rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly. The second group, Mr. Speaker, are 34 grade 6 students from the Lauderdale School in the constituency of Glengarry. They're accompanied by their teachers, Mrs. Safont, Mr. Allen, student teacher Ms. Sherman, and an aide, Mrs. Pettiger. I'd ask them to rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Solicitor General.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me pleasure to introduce, last but certainly not least, 26 grade 10 students from the Balf High School, Camrose constituency. They're accompanied by Mr. Lyle Urga, the teacher, and Hazel Urga as an escort. I'd ask them to stand and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly. They're in the members' gallery.
Cypress Redcliffe.
Some members of the Alberta Cattle Commission that are attending the Assembly this afternoon. First, Mr. Warren Brower, who is Warren and his family are my most southerly constituent, living about 200 feet north of the American border. Tom Livingston from the Brooks area, and Wayne Heller from the urban area.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, if I may be allowed to join this parade, I'd like to, through you, to the legislature, introduce a very hard-working chairman of a group of electors in the Peace River country working on behalf of farm causes up there, Ms. Wendy Hale, sitting in the public gallery.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my first question to the Minister of Dams over there. Mr. Speaker, today we saw an example of the incompetence of this government in action. And I'm, of course, speaking about the judgment that was sent down today, Mr. Speaker, between the Friends of the Old Man Dam River Society and the Minister of the Environment. The Minister is well aware they've ruled against this minister, Mr. Speaker. And because of that, Mr. Speaker, the note, it says in here that in light of the clear non-compliance on the part of Alberta Environment with the mandatory statutory requirements imposed under sections 15, 8B, and 17 of the Act, the minister exceeded his jurisdiction by granting interim permits, Mr. Speaker. It goes on to say that they're quashing all licenses and permits issued by the minister and or the controller resulting from this initial application. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister, in view of the fact that the minister clearly lacks the authority to continue with this old man dam, has he issued a stop work order at this point?
Mr. Speaker, the decision that was made public today is a result of a recent hearing before the Honourable Chief Justice Moore basically quashed an administrative order that was issued by an official in Alberta Environment. The Honourable Member points out that from the document, and is quoted one line from the document issued by the Chief Justice, it should be pointed out as well, Mr. Speaker, that as of February 1982, there has been delegated authority with respect to this matter, and since that period of time, the Controller of Water Resources is authorized and empowered to undertake those duties and responsibilities of the Minister set forth in the various sections of the Water Resources Act. I might point out as well, Mr. Speaker, that under the legal process, my understanding is that I've so been advised by legal counsel that we must await another further document that will be forthcoming from the Chief Justice, a document referred to as an order.
Well, Mr. Speaker, supplementary question. It says in here clearly that the minister exceeded his jurisdiction. They screwed up even getting permits, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. And my question to the minister, we want to know, with this ruling, rather than waiting another one, this is very clear. Has the minister issued a stop work order or not? The people of Alberta want to know this, Mr. Speaker.
I think, Mr. Speaker, it's important to note that since February of 1982, decisions with respect to the issuing of interim licenses with respect to water resources matters have been delegated and under the authority of the Controller of Water Resources. Since that time, the Controller of Water Resources has issued approximately 670 interim licenses each and every year since that particular time, and it's questionable whether or not, at this point in time, pending further legal advice, whether or not the question that the Leader of the Opposition has raised is one that has been addressed in this particular decision by the judge today.
The answer is no.
Mr. Speaker, this is very clear. This has come down from the courts, Mr. Speaker. Is the minister saying that he's going to ignore this judge's ruling and continue to break the law because clearly it's illegal? Is that what he's saying, Mr. Speaker?
Absolutely not, Mr. Speaker. It has to be very clear that there are a number of steps that will now be undertaken with respect to this matter. I've already indicated that it's my understanding that an additional document will be forthcoming from the Chief Justice, referred to as an order by the people in the legal community. In addition to that, it will be the intent of the Government of Alberta to appeal this decision. Secondly, the Department of the Environment, meaning Alberta Environment, will reapply in accordance with the recommendations of the Chief Justice, as outlined in this particular document today. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, the Controller of Water Resources will be provided with all of the information that the Chief Justice indicated was missing as per the direction of the Chief Justice. It's our intent to comply with all of the aspects of the decision rendered by the Chief Justice today.
Mr. Speaker, obviously the minister can't control even what's going on in his own department. Again, he's shown his incompetence, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Premier. The government can't even issue its own permits without screwing it up. And my question is, does the Premier still have confidence in this minister to be the Minister of Environment, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, while it is true that the Chief Justice has found a legal technicality which has caused him to issue the decision which he has, the matter nevertheless is now within the hands of the Chief Law Officer of the Crown, the Honourable Attorney General, who will deal with it along the lines as expressed by the Minister of Environment.
Order, please. The Chair just wishes to express its concern about the phrase that has been used twice in light of the fact of the general public watching the proceedings as well as the school children. I think perhaps another phrase could be used other than screwing it up. Member for Little Bow.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary question to the Minister of Environment with regards to this matter, and my representation is on behalf of hundreds of southern Albertans that have fought hard to have a dam built on the Three Rivers site. Could the Minister indicate at this time that all haste will be taken to remove any legal delays to proceed with the dam and the construction of the dam so that the target date that was established within the last 2 years can be maintained?
Mr. Speaker, it's the intent of the government to appeal the decision of the Chief Justice today, and that will follow the normal legal process and on options available to the government.
Supplementary, Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Attorney General. And from the point of view of the fact that the Minister of Environment has shown that he's either unable or will not comply or understand the rules and regulations of this province, is the Attorney General going to take it upon himself to make sure that this dam is suspended rather than leave it in the hands of such an incompetent minister?
Mr. Speaker, as has already been indicated, it is the intention of the government, once the order has been filed with the Court of Queen's Bench, to consider all legal steps which might be undertaken or required as a result of this judgment. And as has already been indicated, it will be the intention of the government to appeal this decision of the Chief Justice. And it is, of course, a legal matter that is of some complexity, since the ruling came as a result of an application for an order for certiorari, which in itself is a rather limited prerogative writ, and therefore not all the information which the Department of the Environment now has in its possession was available to the administrative official at the time at the point in time it was under examination, and that information will, of course, be made available now, and we will have to see what additional legal steps will have to be undertaken to ensure that this major undertaking on behalf of all of southern Alberta will proceed appropriately and legally.
Member for Pincher Creek Crow's Nest, supplementary.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Given the fact that under the Prairie Provinces Water Board, Alberta is required to pass 50% of the flow of the South Saskatchewan River at the Saskatchewan-Alberta boundary, and that the Bow, Red Deer, and Old Man Rivers make up the South Saskatchewan River system, could the Minister of Environment advise the Assembly as to the impact of not proceeding with the Old Man River Dam on future requirements for water for domestic, municipal, industrial, agricultural, and recreational uses to benefit the citizens of not only the Old Man River Basin, but also the citizens of Calgary who live on the Bow system and the citizens of Red Deer who live on the Red Deer system?
The impact, Mr. Speaker, would be horrendous. I think as all Albertans know that while we're basking in above-average temperatures right now, and as we sit here in December 9, 1987, we've not had any moisture drop in our province since the second and third week of August of 1987. As well, Mr. Speaker, I think it's very important that we should all remember the drought situation that unveiled upon our province from the early 1980s through the mid-1980s, and the impact, the very negative impact on all forms of life, be it wildlife, animal life, plant life.
And our life. Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to designate my second question to the member from Edmonton-Beverly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question this afternoon is to the Minister of Occupational Health and Safety, or Community Health and Safety, and also his responsibility for Workers' Compensation Board. This year's budget of the Workers' Compensation Board was slashed by 62%. Appeals by injured workers to the Claims Services Committee has increased by a whopping 109% to October of this year as compared to the same period last year. For 65,000 worksites in Alberta, Mr. Speaker, there are only a total of 55 worksite inspectors. Now, what conclusions would the minister draw from the fact that there are 1.5 times as many permanent park rangers in Alberta and twice as many wildlife officers in this province as compared to worksite inspectors?
Well, Mr. Speaker, once again, the honourable member doesn't have his facts put together in any organized or factual fashion at all. First of all, the Workers' Compensation Board's annual budget has not been reduced by anywhere in the numbers that the member has mentioned. The board's budget is fully intact and has all of the resources available to it to pay compensation to injured workers, all of the compensation that they are entitled to. The member also threw in some comments about occupational health and safety and inspection. Mr. Speaker, he quoted some erroneous number. We have, in fact, 79 inspectors in our occupational health and safety division, and in 1986-87 they made nearly 12,500 inspections of various work sites throughout the province.
Good research, Ed.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Well, is it the minister's position that his 20% cut in the education and development program funding and a $60,000 cut in worksite inspection funding have contributed to the safer workplace for the average working men and women in this province who have to rely on his department for the safety in their workplace?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the government does not pretend to be responsible for accidents in the workplace. That is the responsibility of individual employers and individual employees. No government should take that responsibility on. It belongs to those who work in the workplace and who are responsible.
Hey, I suppose you're wondering what Santa Claus is doing on QCTV 10 magazine. Well, I thought, why not come down to Edmonton a little early, bring in the sleigh for a tune-up, see what's going on. Hey, I need myself a tree. Look at these beauties. They're beautiful. You know, I think I'll walk around and check to see if everybody's been good. You know, it's
copies here of the correspondence from those bodies responding to his invitations to participate in the review.
Mr. Speaker, that was a matter that was dealt with on the order paper just the other day. I also don't seem to see the connection with the first question. But, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that we at the Workers' Compensation Board in the directional planning process consulted with a number of union organizations, including the Alberta Federation of Labour, including a number of other employer organizations. And the results of those consultations, the result of and the report of those consultations will be made available in January of this year.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this minister makes statements about information that we've never been able to see, and I'm asking for copies of the documentation he has received from those labour groups that he's asked for them to participate. Now, will the minister now accede to the demand of injured workers, of healthy workers, and of thousands of Albertans across this province to establish a full series of public hearings province-wide into the workers' compensation system?
Mr. Speaker, I answered a similar question to my colleague from Lacombe on November the 26th, and said at that time that once the consultant's report is released in January of next year, that I would expect that would be the document that would be a useful tool for public debate, and at that time all Albertans, including injured workers, employers, and other employees, will have a perfect opportunity to express their views on the Workers' Compensation Board.
Member for Lacombe, supplementary followed by Edmonton Goldbar.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister. Is it correct that the Occupational Health and Safety Council, which has organized labor recognized and employers, aren't that they advising the Minister on an ongoing basis on all these issues?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is absolutely right. We have an Occupational Health and Safety Council under the chairmanship of Mrs. Maureen Shaw of Bragg Creek, and that council has been providing me with an awful lot of good advice, including actions that this government should be taking to encourage the oil and gas industry in particular to take responsible action to make sure that safety is a #1 priority in the oil and gas patch.
Edmonton Goldbar, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last spring I raised the need for a review of the WCB and was informed that there was one going on. Wait for it. When is the minister going to make public not only the administrative review of the Workers' Compensation Board, but his responses to it, in the sense of what action, besides another review of the same situation, what action he's going to take so that we'll all know the awful truth?
Mr. Speaker, the report that I spoke of, a directional plan, a review of all aspects of the Workers' Compensation Board, will be released in January. And those will be our suggestions, our proposals, our recommendations on action that must be taken to improve the management and the organization of the Workers' Compensation Board. And then we will have a perfect opportunity for all Albertans to express their views. And once Albertans have had a chance to express their views, then this government will take the appropriate action.
Main question, Leader of the Liberals.
Mr. Speaker, my question to the Premier on the whole free trade shilling he's doing. Like many Albertans, Mr. Speaker, we're getting pretty fed up with the evasion, arm-waving, rhetoric whenever we try to ask him a question, asking for a plain common sense answer. Mr. Speaker, the public wants to know, and in fact the public has a right to know, Mr. Speaker, just what is being agreed to in this proposed agreement and how it will affect their lives. Now, Mr. Speaker, the first question is to elaborate a bit on yesterday's question on the value of our dollar. Can the Premier tell us if Ottawa has told him what their long-term plan is for controlling the value of our Canadian dollar with respect to the American dollar? Is it to hold it the same, let it drop, or push it up?
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe we've gone into it in any great detail. It's been discussed from time to time. Those are discussions, obviously, Mr. Speaker, that I would not find it wise to deal with in a public way in order that some people might well want to speculate on that information.
Mr. Speaker, this is unbelievable. A rise of 10 or 15 cents in our dollar could ruin our agricultural export here in Alberta. And he says he has no concept. Is there possible, Mr. Speaker, could the Premier tell us that at least that there's some sort of mechanism set up whereby the Prime Minister of this country, before he can fiddle with the value of the dollar, will have to come back to the First Ministers? Otherwise, we could ruin our agricultural export industry.
Mr. Speaker, that's hypothetical hogwash.
Holy. Mr. Speaker, I know you've got rid of one word that you said wasn't parliamentary, but I can say holy smoke. What have we got here? Let's go on to something else, Mr. Speaker. Is the Premier aware that under the COAT, temporary entry for business purposes, for the transfer of labor between the two countries, that the Americans are going to allow us to transfer executives down there without question, but we in turn will allow any form of labor to be transferred up here? What is the Premier doing, or has he consulted with his national leader to find out what we can do to stop a flood of cheap southern U.S. labor in here when there are mega projects put on the burner by his government here?
Again, Mr. Speaker, a bunch of hypothetical hogwash.
Mr. Speaker, at times I feel I'm just working on a punching bag, but I guess I can't take sympathy. Will the Premier then, Mr. Speaker, stop this shameful attitude of his and strike an all-party committee for January and February that will have public hearings for those in this province that have concerns, and also to have those studies that he already has tabled so that they can be studied in committee? Would he do that in January and February so that the people of this province at least have some idea what he has agreed to when he talks to his Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, if the House wanted to adopt some all-party committee, the honourable member should put it on the order paper and let the House decide.
Member, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, we're gamely waiting for this final draft that's supposed to be coming sooner or later, and with a January the 2nd deadline. My question to the Premier, is the Premier aware of what's in the final draft and what's been given up since the last time he saw the transcript? Is he aware of it at this point?
Mr. Speaker, officials of the government have been in Ottawa dealing with final drafting and the final transcript. We believe it'll be here to us sometime this week, and as I think all members know, there will be a First Minister's meeting late next week in which it will be gone over by all governments in Canada, both officials, ministers, and First Ministers in some detail.
Leader of the Representatives, followed by the member for Wainwright.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Environment, and since the subject of dams is on his mind, I'd like to raise the issue that was raised during the recent cabinet tour in that area with regards to the dam on the Little Bow River and Mosquito Creek. Could the Minister indicate at this time whether that the decision has been made with regards to proceeding with that dam, and has any target date been established?
Mr. Speaker, in recent years there have been a number of reservoirs that have been brought to completion in southern Alberta, including Badger Lake, Stafford, 40 Mile Coulee Reservoir, and the Pisano Dam that was opened in 1987, and as all member knows, construction is ongoing at the Old Man River Dam. There are a number of other additional projects that are currently under review, including a reservoir in Mosquito Creek that would provide water to Clear Lake and regulate flows in the Little Bow. And in addition to that, review is also being made of a proposed reservoir on Pine Coulee or Willow Creek and on the Milk River as well. All three under review, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, at that time in September, the Minister indicated that soil samples and drilling would take place post-haste after the cabinet tour, and I was wondering if the minister has established a time schedule for that and will be allotting budgetary funds to proceed with that responsibility.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of the Environment doesn't recall making that statement or that commitment, but it sounds like a pretty good idea, and I'll certainly take it under review.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the minister. Could the minister indicate whether the structures that were listed in his previous answer, will be budgeted for? I can't ask the amount, but will there be a budget for those structures in the 1988-89 budget?
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member knows, that one will have to await really the direction given to the Assembly by the provincial treasurer when he brings down the budget for 1988.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister of Environment for dam building, providing he has managed to get the permits straight and provided we're not going to get sued, has he given us any, or can he give the House an estimate of what the cost of that dam works out to per individual that's going to use the water downstream? I understand only 50 farmers or ranchers will advantage from that. Admittedly, they're in a very good constituency.
Mr. Speaker, what the honourable member has not done is identified what dam it is he wants to talk about. I mentioned the Badger Lake, Stafford, 40 Mile Coulee, Bassano, Pine Coulee, Mosquito Creek, Milk River. I forgot also Hutch Lake as well. Perhaps the member would be good enough to at least tell me which one of these reservoirs that are very important for water conservation and preservation and regulation it is that he's most interested in.
Supplementary, Cypress Redcliffe.
Question, Mr. Speaker. In the water construction and dams and reservoirs the minister mentioned, I wonder if he can inform the Assembly how many rural municipalities in southern Alberta and how many people in those municipalities benefit from the construction of those projects?
Virtually everyone, Mr. Speaker. Alberta is in an overall deficit position with respect to water, and that may sound like a statement that would cause some people to lift their eyebrows, but in our province of Alberta, we are simply in a deficit position of water. And of course, we have a surplus, an incredible surplus of water in the northern part of the province, and we have an enormous deficiency of water in the southern part. In order to make sure that we preserve, conserve our very rare and precious resource known as water, then we must manage that resource, Mr. Speaker. And these water projects are built for that, to ensure that we do have life in southern Alberta, so that we do have a society in southern Alberta, Mr. Speaker.
I hope so. Member for Wainwright, followed by the member for Edmonton. Supplementary, Calgary Mountain View.
Supplementary to the Minister of the Environment. I wonder if the Minister of the Environment will take the opportunity at this point to assure the legislature that he's going to review the original findings of the Environment Council of Alberta regarding the Old Man River Dam and adopt the alternatives that were outlined in that report.
Mr. Speaker, on Friday last, I invited all members of the Assembly to join with me when I presented a major speech to the Environment Council of Alberta. Unfortunately, the member from Westlock Sturgeon, of course, was more concerned about other matters than being concerned about protection of the environment. I noticed that the honourable member who just raised the question didn't attend. I'm going to be circulating to all members of the Assembly a speech that I presented to the ECA. My comments are contained within that speech. However, Mr. Speaker, if I could get the unanimous approval of the House to respond, I'd be very glad to quote from this very important speech and State of the Message Environment with respect to that, but I think I would need...
That's right. Goodness. Member for Wainwright, followed by Edmonton Strathcona, Edmonton Goldbar, Drumheller, Cypress Redcliffe, Calgary Mountain View, Calgary Buffalo, Edmonton Avonmore, Redwater, Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Energy, concerning the oil and gas exploration on the Wainwright military base, which is very important to us in the Wainwright constituency, regarding the seismic data. Could the Minister advise the House on the status of the seismic data information?
Yes, I can, Mr. Speaker, in that the provincial government began negotiations a number of months ago with the federal government, Department of National Defense, for access to the Wainwright Military Reserve for exploration and development purposes. And the Department of National Defense indicated that they wanted to have one seismic operator to work out there rather than a variety of operators. So the Department of Energy contracted 3 geophysical consultants to oversee a tendering process whereby, as a result of that process, 18 bids came in and the seismic work was awarded to Enertech Geophysical Services. They completed their work in the month of November. The data was available for viewing sample sections of that data on November the 27th in Calgary. There were some 175 people in attendance to view that data from over 50 companies, and the reaction was generally very positive.
Supplementary then, when will the companies be able to purchase this information, and is it open for all of the companies who wish to participate in it, and what will it cost them?
Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, a letter went out to the industry dated November the 16th to inform them of the process that would be followed with respect to the viewing on November the 27th, as well as the fact that anyone who wished to purchase the seismic data must enter into an undertaking to submit a request accompanied by a deposit by 4:30 this afternoon, December the 9th in Calgary. The data will be sold at cost. The cost of the seismic work was approximately $500,000 to $600,000, and that data will be sold at cost as the government expended those funds as a result of the process we went through.
Further supplementary, when will the land sales come up, and when can we expect drilling to begin on the base?
Well, Mr. Speaker, one of the difficulties on the Wainwright Military Reserve, as the honourable member well knows, is that military activity takes place out there, and there are certain times of the year when it would be difficult to have exploration and development crews at work. In the spring, with possibly some 20 to 25,000 troops out there, drilling would not be able to begin until after July the 1st, 1988. But there would be a land sale probably around about the end of next April for the purpose of, well, all companies, anyone can bid at that particular land sale. It would be handled in the usual process, and then drilling could begin after July 1st, 1988.
Chair recognizes Edmonton Strathcona, followed by Calgary Buffalo, then Drumheller.
My question is to the Minister of Community and Occupational Health. Mr. Speaker, at the beginning of this month, the staff of the Provincial Laboratory of Public Health, the Edmonton branch, received notice that from the 15th of February 1988 onwards, no urine specimens would be accepted for analysis. There are some 21,000 such specimens annually, Mr. Speaker, and the result of this is to drive the test into the private laboratories. The expressed reason for this, Mr. Speaker, was to save $100,000 of the budget in the laboratory, which, of course, was severely cut back. My question is to the Minister, since the cost at the private laboratories funded by Medicare will be some $250,000, will the Minister undertake to the House to give the laboratory the wherewithal to continue those testings to avoid this ludicrous situation of spending $250,000 to avoid a cost of $100,000?
Mr. Speaker, I too would be concerned if that were the case. What I have directed our officials to do is to make sure that the liaison committee that exists as between the provincial lab under the University of Alberta and our department meets to address the budget concerns of the lab, both northern and southern Alberta labs, to ensure that all steps are taken to prevent that from happening.
Well, I'm obliged, Mr. Speaker, but will the Minister acknowledge that the steps taken earlier this year to screw down the budget of the provincial laboratory, which had the effect of driving these tests into the private laboratories, has been counterproductive?
No, Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't. I would suggest that the government's restraint program is something that is responsible, certainly fiscally responsible, and where those agencies that are truly not able to operate under their existing budget, then we will listen and be responsive and be sensitive. But, Mr. Speaker, I would perhaps the honourable member of the honourable Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care might want to comment, but this is just one of many issues and items that the Utilization Committee established by the honourable Minister shall be looking at.
Well, that's a good idea. If I can address my supplementary to the Minister of Hospitals and Medicare, Mr. Speaker, and ask him what sense does it make to pay some $80 million of public money to the private laboratories to conduct these tests that are funded by Medicare when we have lavishly and expensively and beautifully equipped laboratories at the major hospitals in the province, which are only used for 16 hours, which are not used for 16 hours a day, by having the test conducted there round the clock.
Mr. Speaker, it makes a great deal of sense if you're in Milk River or McLennan or Hinton and you're a medical doctor or patient and you want a diagnosis rather quickly instead of waiting several weeks.
There are hospitals close to those centres too, Mr. Speaker, but my final supplementary to the Minister of Community and Occupational Health, will he assure the House, Mr. Speaker, that the provincial laboratories of public health in Edmonton and Calgary will in fact continue in their role for 75 years as being public laboratories and not mere research adjuncts of the departments of medicine at the universities in those two cities?
Mr. Speaker, both of those laboratories continue to play a very essential role in the public health system of Alberta.
Okay, supplementary question. Member, supplementary, main question. Supplementary, Calgary Buffalo.
To the Minister of Hospitals and Medicare, I've had the same type of situation raised by doctors with respect to the Foothills Hospital at Calgary. These doctors agree that we could save a fortune if the government took over much of the laboratory testing. I'm wondering why the government doesn't do something about this sensible way of saving money instead of cutting meaningful preventive health programs.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, the government does fund a very extensive network of laboratory facilities in the active treatment hospital system throughout the province. It is inappropriate to suggest that all of the private labs that operate in this province should be taken over, or their work they're doing should be taken over by the provincial lab in Edmonton or in Calgary. As I said earlier, if you're in many other locations in this province looking for a medical examination and wanting to find out what's wrong with a patient as a medical doctor, you don't want to wait on the bureaucracy that might exist in the provincial lab. Now, I know the Liberals and the NDP would like to close all the rural hospitals, but starting in by closing the labs isn't going to help.
Member for Calgary Buffalo, main question, followed by Drumheller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're all aware that there is a judgment quashing the licenses with respect to the Old Man River Dam. I'd be pleased to provide the minister with a copy if he doesn't have one. If anything, the judgment confirms the point that I made in question period on Friday to the effect that the Department of the Environment can't properly act as an environmental watchdog at the same time it's responsible for building dams. It has an impossible conflict of interest. It has an impossible conflict of interest as applicant, evaluator, and grantor of licenses. And I'm wondering whether the minister could advise this House, in light of the problems in this regard made clear by the court judgment, whether the minister will reconsider his position and transfer responsibility for water development projects out of Alberta Environment as recommended by the Environment Council of Alberta in 1986.
Mr. Speaker, there are three important aspects to the environment. One is air, one is land, and the other is water. And I think it's just very, very important that we do everything possible to protect and preserve our water. And I believe, as the Minister of the Environment has a very key responsibility with respect to this preservation of this very important and rare resource. And I'm very happy to continue having the responsibility of being responsible for water management and conservation in Alberta, Mr. Speaker.
That's why we don't read the minister's speeches or go to them. The minister has had an opportunity to review his department's procedures, and I'm wondering whether he could tell us how he expects his department to be able to play a proper watchdog role at the same time as it wears the dual hat of promoter and builder of dams. How can those two work together compatibly?
Mr. Speaker, as has already been indicated on at least several occasions in the question period, the matter with respect to the judgment brought forward today by the Honourable Chief Justice Moore is one that will be appealed by the government. And that matter will take its proper course before the judicial system. On the point of licenses, I should point out that since the policy of decentralization of decision-making with respect to interim water licenses has occurred in 1982, there have been some 670 interim water licenses provided each and every year, Mr. Speaker, and to my knowledge the system works quite well in terms of providing an opportunity for all Albertans to participate. I would point out as well, Mr. Speaker, that the reason the decision was made in 1982 to basically delegate the responsibility from the minister to an administrative officer within the system came about as a result of petitions from a number of Albertans who said that as long as the Minister of the Environment was the one who issued the interim water license, the Minister of the Environment would always be susceptible to political pressures, and so ensure that there would be no politicizing of the provision of water licenses in our provinces and interim water licenses, that it was best that an administrative officer within the department had that responsibility. So it's kind of interesting, Mr. Speaker, that after having followed that process to make sure that there has been no politicizing of water licenses, now the suggestion is being made by the opposition today that in fact should be the minister who should make each and every decision with respect to the issuance of a license.
A very creative interpretation of my question, Mr. Speaker. The minister referred to 670 water licenses having been granted, and I'm wondering whether he has undertaken a review of all of these licenses to ensure that the expediency, haste, and enthusiasm of advancing these projects did not ever override the procedural protections of the legislation, as the court has said it did with respect to the Old Man River Dam.
Mr. Speaker, it's my understanding that the original submission with respect to the interim license was made to the Controller of Water Resources and made in 1985, and a decision was made nearly 2 years after the fact. But I want to reiterate again that there's nothing inherent in the statement I've just made that questions the decision of the Chief Justice. There is a process of law that will be followed by the Government of Alberta, and that will include appealing the decision brought forward by the Justice today.
The minister in his comments has pointed out that there was a tremendously long time during which an environmental impact assessment could have been carried out. I'm wondering whether we can now expect for the first time such a full assessment, since construction appears likely to be halted for some time in any event.
Mr. Speaker, earlier in the question period on another day, not today, I did make comments with respect to the definition of the word environmental impact assessment. I've also pointed out what the national definition has been, and when national leaders, environment leaders across the country responded to a set phraseology with respect to what does an environmental impact assessment mean. And it's been in Alberta since 1986 that we followed our well-defined public policy. Environmental impact assessments have been occurring in the southern part of the province of Alberta with respect to the need to manage water ever since that very famous surveyor Palliser said that southern Alberta was a desert and would remain a desert unless we learned how to manage our water.
Member, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, to follow up to the Premier. From this Department of Environment, in the last few months, there's been two major administrative blunders, Mr. Speaker. The toxic gas cloud, we couldn't lay charges there in Calgary, and now this in the courts, administrative matters. What will it take to remove this minister from that portfolio, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, I take great pleasure in having an opportunity to say publicly I have tremendous confidence in the Minister of Environment.
Cypress Radcliffe on a supplementary, very succinctly, please. Then the chair recognizes Drumheller.
Supplementary question to the Minister. The opinion has been left that there wasn't any public hearings in the development of the plan to construct a dam on the Oldman River. I wonder if the Minister can briefly outline the public hearings that took place before that action occurred.
Mr. Speaker, it is indeed unfortunate that certain members of the House continue to leave impressions that, in fact, there is no dam under construction, as an example. Construction has been going in the Oldman River Dam site since the early part of 1986. Between 1978 and 1984, discussion with respect to water management, on-stream, off-stream storage, was a major item of review and debate in our province of Alberta. Countless numbers of meetings, public hearings, initiated under paid for by the government through the Environment Council of Alberta, were held in numerous communities throughout the province of Alberta with respect to this matter. Mr. Speaker, I dare say there are very few citizens anywhere who were not aware by 1984, when the Premier of the day announced that a dam would be constructed in the Oldman River, who were not aware of the debate, the interest. Now, I know that there have been some people elected in 1986 who are now trying to disguise the issue and provide some fog with respect to this matter, Mr. Speaker. But it simply isn't true, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the member for Drumheller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Transportation and Utilities. Since the introduction of seatbelt legislation in July of this year, usage has averaged about 80%, which is the highest of any province in Canada. Can the Minister tell us what he has planned to maintain this high compliance with the seatbelt legislation?
Time for question period has expired, Honourable Minister. May we have unanimous consent of the House to continue this set of questions? Opposed? Carried. Minister, Transportation Utilities.
Mr. Speaker, the seatbelt legislation has seen usage in the province of Alberta reach a high of 85% on the average, with the city of Calgary actually having the highest record of about 88%. What has occurred? We're working on the information and the benefit of being one of the last provinces in Canada to have seatbelt legislation, Mr. Speaker. And as a result of what has occurred in other provinces in the past, in the period about 6 months to 1 year after the legislation comes in, there is a bit of a drop in the usage. And what we intend to do is, we now have underway, as a matter of fact, it started some days ago, a program that would involve 1 week where we tell everybody we're going to be in a specific area and that we will be checking you, and then for the next 2 weeks we'll check you. And they are defined. As a matter of fact, they started in the Barhead, Westlock area on November 23rd. They will cover Drumheller, Vegreville, Fort Macleod, Peace River and Grand Prairie, Rocky Mountain House, Vermilion, Grand Cache, and Pincher Creek. And that will be followed sometime after the rural areas with the same kind of a program in the metropolitan centers and the urban cities. I would suggest it's a courtesy program where we'll identify for you that we're going to be in the area through the RCMP, and you can do like my radio station, you can buckle up with Boomer or pay up.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary question. I'd like the Minister to confirm that it isn't just the rural areas that are going to be subject to this, these blitzes. And I was just wondering also whether this is going to be a one-time blitz or whether it become a regular occurrence in our province.
Mr. Speaker, if I were to suggest that it was a one-time effort, I'm sure that after that effort had been completed, people may not wear their seatbelt, so I won't answer the question in that sense. It's not necessarily a one-time effort. It may be on an annual basis, and only time, dollars, and the use of buckling up your seatbelt will determine that. But initially, as I said a little earlier, it is a program that is starting in the rural areas right now, will be followed by the same type of a program in the urban centres after.
Final supplementary, Mr. Speaker. The need for preschoolers to be transported to an approved child restraints deters many parents from providing transportation for kindergarten or play school functions. Considering that it has now been in place for over 5 months, will the minister review the legislation at this time to give further consideration to additional exemptions?
Mr. Speaker, I did give that commitment at the time the legislation was introduced and passed, that after 6 months, sometime after 6 months, that we would be reviewing it to see if there were some weak points in the legislation, and that particular concern has been raised a number of times with us, and we'll be looking at that in the ensuing months.
Supplementary, Clover Bar, followed by Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, since the legislation was enacted, has the minister had an opportunity to find out a review of the fatalities that have occurred in the province in motor vehicle accidents, if in fact seat belts were worn in those instances?
I haven't got the detailed information, Mr. Speaker, but we're attempting to pull some of that together after the 6-month period. That's what I had requested it for, so we could have that kind of information to base some of the changes, if changes are to be made, on that. I'm convinced, as a user of seat belts, that we'll be able to determine that there has been a savings of dollars in medical situation. The exact amount I can't say. The only one we've had some difficulty, if I may, Mr. Speaker, in the fact that we've had smoke on the highways in the last while because of this different type of a fall and early winter that we have had. And there's been a number of accidents that have occurred, and in some cases, seatbelts were not worn, and that has caused some serious injuries to those who were involved, unfortunately.
Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the minister, since, as he noted, Westlock Sturgeon has been picked out as one of the first areas he wanted to check out to seatbelts to see whether that they're doing proper safety standards along that line. Would he agree now to upgrade 794 so it's at least safe to drive on?
Member for Athabasca-Lac-La-Biche on the supplementary.
To the Minister of Transportation, I'm glad that Athabasca-Lac-La-Biche is not part of that enforcement. Is the Minister going to be providing... will the Minister be advising his police department to basically warn people rather than fine on their first offense, or will it be an automatic fine on every situation?
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to comment on that particular question. July 1, 1987 was the date where the warning became a fact, and I suggested at that particular time that the police, through the Solicitor General, and the police forces that are under his jurisdiction, would have the right then to apply the fine as we had passed in this legislature. And in as much as we're now 5.5 months into it, and if we go into a program where we suggest to you that we may stop you and suggest to you that next week we're going to be checking you, if that isn't sufficient warning, maybe I should up the fine.
Okay, request with regard to Standing Order 40, member for Edmonton-Avonmore.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to seek unanimous consent of the Assembly under Standing Order 40 to waive the normal notice requirement for the motion that I distributed earlier. The motion states, be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly congratulate, thank, and extend its best wishes to Mr. Ronald Reagan, President of the United States, and Mr. Mikhail Gorbachev, President of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and General Secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union on the event of their signing the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty at Washington, D.C., United States of America. And be it further resolved that the Speaker convey this resolution to Messrs. Reagan and Gorbachev. As I am allowed to address the urgency of this matter, I would simply say that good news is all too rare in this world, and that its arrival, especially at this season of peace and goodwill, ought urgently to be heralded.
Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, if I may, for clarification, it has been the custom in the Assembly on a motion of commendation or congratulations to move it and have it adopted under notices of motion. We're dealing with a different situation here, and I would ask for the information of members who are shortly to be asked to render a decision if there is unanimous agreement of all members that should the motion as proposed by the Honourable Member for Edmonton Avonmore proceed, will it be moved and proceed without debate? Is there unanimous agreement to that?
First, understanding Order 40, is there unanimous consent of the House with regard to dealing with the motion? Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Unanimous consent is received. The mover of the motion has moved the motion. There's call for the question. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, if any, please say no. Motion is carried unanimously. The Chair would point out that much as the Chair would love to go visit Washington or Moscow, it will be done. The message will be conveyed in written form only. Orders of the day.